Hello, everybody. I'm Kipp Snow, Director of the Transportation Distribution and Logistics Institute at the Community College of Baltimore County.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mike Singer, Community Manager for the Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay Shipwatchers, sponsor of this here Two Guys Talking Ship podcast. Hey, if you're new to the channel, give us a like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be alerted to new podcasts as they come available. Share with your friends across social media. Anybody who you think would be interested in everything that's going on with the port, especially the Key Bridge with this episode, anything going on with the port, anybody you think that might be interested in that, give us a share and tell them how much we're covering. All these details that we're covering on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. Nobody else puts all this stuff together and has it in one place for everybody to check out. So Give us a share if you like what we're doing.
All right, in this Anchor Alert episode 72, we've got a special guest that's coming on.
Yeah, we do.
We'll see Jim Harkness, Chief Engineer for MDTA, back with us
again.
This is a three-peat.
He keeps coming back, Kipp. We must have done something right. I don't know.
Either that or you got, yeah, something.
Well, let me put it this way: we didn't do anything horribly wrong because he keeps coming back.
That's true. That's very true. That's very true. So. All right, let's get into some Key Bridge news that you've got.
Yeah. So, to be absolutely honest with everyone, to rip the cover off the thing, we were kind of thinking we were just going to do this interview with Jim because it's going to be incredible. It'll probably be long. We don't have time to do our whole format for the podcast, but oh my gosh, huge stuff. News items, things have happened since our last podcast, and so gosh, we have to at least cover them or mention them. So in port news, you've all probably heard this. On May 12th, U.S. Department of Justice announced a federal indictment against the owners of the Dolly container ship. Prosecutors say the Dolly used unauthorized fuel flushing pumps, creating hazardous conditions in violation of federal law. Now, we've talked about this. Sal's talked about this. You and I have mentioned this several times, but to have them reiterate it.
Right.
And then violation of federal law. I'm not sure that I knew that. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Also citing the ship's loss of power 24 hours before the crash, the DOJ suggests its owner, Synergy Marine Group, intentionally withheld this information from federal inspectors. And I think we knew that, but before we were debating whether it was something that was required that was to be reported. What is this event something that's required of them to report it to?
Yeah.
I don't know, federal investigators or Coast Guard or whatever. But again, interesting to hear the Department of Justice say those things. You and I can talk about them for a year, but then when the Department of Justice says it, puts a little bit more weight behind it. Mm-hmm. Also on May 12th, which I found, did you find that interesting that both of these things came out the same day?
Right.
And was that on purpose, or the state of Maryland finalized a $2.25 billion settlement with Grace Ocean Private Limited and Synergy Marine Limited, owner and operator of the container ship Dolly.
Yeah.
There's no way in heck I expected to see that anytime soon or anywhere near that number.
Right.
Again, I just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Kipp is actually in the industry. I'm just a talking head. I'm just fast. I have really, my knowledge is limited, but I was shocked when that was revealed. And maybe more shocked because it came out the same day. It was like,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I know they had the big press release where they made these announcements, and ironically, it was out there at Pier 13 with the Savannah, but right around Maritime Day. However, I was really kind of surprised that they had progressed at that level through all of that and was able to announce both things.
Now, do we have any fly on the wall information about how that came to be, about how they wound up on the stern deck of the Savannah?
I am not sure.
Yeah, I just fascinated by how did that come to be? Anyway. And then on Monday, a written request was made to delay the civil trial. And when I heard that, I was like, oh no, here we go. I'll be honest with you. We try to just report things, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to put some of my emotional. I didn't want to see that happen. And I was not going to be happy if it did happen. Typical process, right? But
sure.
I did not want to see that happen. So that was Monday.
So take the emotional part of it out. The legal process allows for those requests and for the judge to accept or deny.
Yes.
And so that's I can understand there's a legal process, but there's also let's move forward with this thing and actually address it.
Right. So that was on Monday. The written request was made. So we're taping this on Friday. So Friday the 22nd. So it was Monday. Then on Wednesday, the judge denied that claim. Trial is set to begin June 1st. So we could talk about this a lot more, but we've got some incredible stuff coming up with Jim here soon. So
yeah. So why don't we go ahead and break at this point, and we'll move over into that interview now, and you'll hear Jim, and we've got some questions, but he provides us. I think he's going to provide us with some answers to some questions that we have been collecting and hearing over the past week or so. So why don't we go ahead and get into that interview? All right, everybody. We want to welcome back to the Two Guys Talking Ship podcast, Jim Harkness, the chief engineer of the Maryland Transportation Authority, to give us an update on things with the Key Bridge rebuild. There have been a number of newsworthy items over the past couple of weeks, and I think it's important to let everybody know that the work has not stopped in this process of everything that's going on. So welcome back, Jim. You're now a 3-time repeat offender here with the podcast, so glad to have you.
Yeah, you're our first three-peat, man. So,
all right,
congrats.
Well, we do appreciate you having us on again and being able to kind of talk things through with you guys. We really relish that opportunity. Want to be able to continue that conversation about the work on the Key Bridge rebuild, and as you said, Kipp, our message is that work is not stopping. So, unfortunately, we're unable to continue to our phase 2 of the progressive design build with our current contractor, Kiewitt. But as I said, they are our current contractor, so we're still under contract with them. They're still under contract with us. We have a significant amount of work agreed to with them, and that work is going to continue. And in parallel, my team is working on developing the procurement documents for new contracts so that we can roll those out as quickly as possible and continue that work along the critical path to deliver this project as quickly as we can, safely though, and of course with striving for the best cost and schedule as possible.
Sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, it is amazing how many people just don't know that the work is still going. And I can't tell you how many people I've told that to. I don't know. People just don't know. And so I'm out there trying to do my part, educating folks about that. like when we get into talking about all that's happened since the last time we talked, and the big news is the Kiewitt off ramping, right? So we always knew that was a possibility. We always knew that was built in.
That's right.
I think some of us were kind of hoping that it wouldn't happen. It did. Can you give us a quick overview of what went into that decision?
Yeah. So, as you laid out, we went into this progressive design build. Back in August of 2024, we brought that before the MDTA board, the idea of this progressive design build model. We had, 0% design because this was an emergency contract. We wanted to be able to advance that design as quickly as possible, and this progressive design build model allows us to bring that contractor on very quickly. If you recall, we had a request for proposals out on May 31st of 2024. We were able to get proposals in. We had four teams that proposed on that. We were able to evaluate their proposals, which were, again, based on their qualifications. So it was sort of like, hey, what have you built before? What designers do you have on your team? And we ranked them based on those qualifications. We were able to get through that process very quickly, got that in front of our board by August of 24, and we're underway. And so that progressive design build model allowed us to do that. So it served us well. It does come along with the the idea that you're only awarding that first phase, that design phase, that some of that preliminary work that we were able to do, early work packages we talked about last time. So all that enabled us to advance this as very quickly. So I think we've talked about it a lot. We've kind of tried to put that out there that we advanced from 0% to 70% design in 14 months, which is just incredibly fast. We called it breakneck speed. The contractor and the team that they put together did perform really well, and MDTA along with FHWA and our GEC partners, we were able to advance that design and get it to the point where they were then able to estimate it, and that's what that's the point where the rubber sort of hits the road in terms of you're really talking about hard numbers at that point. So they took their time. They went out to market. They approached subcontractors and suppliers and got real numbers. And we used those too on our side because we were conducting cost estimates in parallel with Kiewitt to just, again, to make sure that we understand the project, they understand the project. Obviously, we've been working together this 14 months to do that. It's just that when you start to, put together the project for your business purposes, so on the business side of things, it's how you want to build the project, that it boils down to a difference in the way you want to kind of carry out the project. It's a business decision, and then, prices start to kind of go their separate ways there at that point. And so the way that Kiewitt saw the project and wanted to work the project was different than the way MDTA and our independent cost estimators saw the project. Now, and ultimately, that ended up being something where we couldn't reconcile. So at the end of the process, they came together. They gave us their proposal for cost and schedule. We looked at it, we compared it, we negotiated. We spent a couple of weeks doing that, looking back and forth. The gap was just too significant to overcome. We just weren't going to be able to close the gap to a place that we could accept or that they would be willing to do the job for. And ultimately, that's where we had to make the regretful decision to off-ramp. Like you said, a lot of people, certainly us included, wanted to continue on. That was, our contractor we selected. The plan was to work this project with them. So, they started the early works. They've got a lot of equipment out there at the site. I was out yesterday. We have 4 marine-based cranes. The 2 largest fully rotating cranes on the East Coast are there. We have 2 land-based cranes out on portions of trestle that we've built. So work is happening. Things are ongoing. It's just
Right.
that
It's pretty neat to be able to look on the camera and see the two different, Pier 24 and Pier 25 as they are now, right, for the new
Yep.
bridge.
You got it.
With the large production piles, standing up, two operations basically simultaneously. You can see them both happening at once.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool thing. I guess what can you elaborate at all? I know Bruce had said, the negotiations were in private. He's not going to reveal a number. But would there, first, what was the number that you were basing it off of? I'm assuming it's not that 70% number. And then, for judgment as to what's acceptable. Right? And then where can you talk about what the line might have been? Like what would have been acceptable? Is that something you can say? Or
I guess the number that we were working, we're still comfortable with that range that we put out in November. The full range of costs there. So
4.8 to 5.2.
yeah, I think when we put that out, it was an estimate, a complete estimate, right? So we didn't have those numbers that we needed from Kiewitt that they went out to industry and got, because they used them for their estimate, but then they gave them to us so that we could use them for our estimate as well, so that we aligned on those kind of things, right? So that's not where there wouldn't be a difference in what we thought something should cost. We were using the same kind of like subcontractor costs, supplier costs that they were using. So there was a variation there based on real-time pricing, right? Because you can understand that there's been a change from last fall to now in terms of economic conditions.
Certainly.
So there were some, some adjustments, not big swings, certainly, but generally I would say that range that we produced in the fall, we're still good with. Obviously, with our approach forward, we'll be updating that at some point, updating estimates. So we'll refine that. But right now, I would say generally we're good with that. In terms of what we, could have considered, that would be something that we have to really work with Federal Highway regarding, right? Because ultimately they're, a partner in this and they're funding this. And so I don't have an answer for you because we didn't get there. We weren't close enough. It was just so far apart that it never got.
You weren't anywhere near what was acceptable. So
right. So if we had landed where we were within a couple of, say 5-10% difference, we would have had a meaningful conversation with Federal Highway about,
right.
We're going to negotiate. We're going to try to get the best price, but what can we come up to if they come down, right? And so when we had such a major gap, essentially we attacked those first negotiating sessions, just identifying where are the biggest differences in how we see the job and how they saw the job being worked. And so we tried to attack those and
was it really types and methods, or are you just talking about price? Or yes, both.
Well, it affects that, right? So
yes, right.
It's all kind of interrelated. Certainly, when you have time impacts cost, especially on a job of this magnitude, and if you extend it by 10, 12 months, it's going to be a big difference. So there's a difference there, but then also just the way that contractors may see risk in certain things, what they're willing to, how they're willing to price and accept risk, and so that those things can all factor into these costs. And
very interesting.
The way you build these projects, some of those things really just build on top of each other. So you start to get
factors
right. So you start to get an exponential difference as opposed to something linear where it's just it's not pure stack.
Opposed to adding 1.1 and 1.1, you're multiplying 1.1 times 1.1, and then
right, something like that where the the cumulative effect is much different than this sum of the differences.
Interesting. I didn't think about the risk thing. That's interesting. So when we talk about,
we always say
and
there's risk in everything we do. So,
well, of course,
it's
of
just
course,
how we,
but I didn't
how we
think
deal with
about
it. So,
I didn't think about the pricing of it.
right.
So
Because remember, they're giving us what was a binding price proposal. So it's essentially the fixed price at that point. So that's what they need to.
so that is risk. Right.
There's
Now
risk
I
in
see.
it.
Now I see the risk. Now I
Yeah.
see it.
There's
I'm
risk
going to
in
give
it.
the I'm going to give the state this number and promise them that
Yes,
I'm going to
you
get
got
it done for this number, and no matter what happens, this is
Al-
all I'm getting.
Yeah, almost essentially. I mean, we had like a risk pool that we were allotting for, but so there are ways you can't. We owner takes some risk. We negotiate those things as well. So there was some of that as well to try to avoid overpricing it in there, right? And you say,
Right.
okay, we agree that this risk may occur. There's some likelihood. If it occurs, we'll go revisit it, and then you would get additional funding because that risk happened and was realized. So
Understood.
again, we didn't really get to that point because we weren't that close on negotiation. So that would have been an additional negotiating point
Right.
if we had gotten there.
Very interesting. So I have to say kudos to you guys, because when you announced the off ramping, and then how many weeks was it till you announced the information session? It didn't seem like it was that long.
No, I
And
think
then
we had
And then
about
out of that information session, I apologize. Then out of that information session came the big news that it would be 4 different contracts, and I'm like, wow, that happened so fast to me that it seemed like you guys already had that written down as if we have to off ramp, we already have an outline plan ready to go. Like, it wasn't like it seemed to happen so fast you didn't have to figure that out.
Yeah, I think because the off ramp is a potential for PDB, and there's
Certainly.
various kind of data points from around the nation in terms of how many of these. It's not there's a couple of contracting methods that allow for off ramping. There's one that's called construction manager at risk, the CMAR, and then there's these progressive design builds, and both they're very similar in function, in that you can do these kind of where you're contracting for pre-construction services, and then you come to terms on these packages that are for construction. And so there's some data points around the 10 maybe 20% where off ramping occurs. So it's a reality in this type of contracting. So it is something that we had a contingency planning for. So we were contemplating what to do in the event that you couldn't reach agreement for phase 2 with Kiewitt, even if it was partial agreement, right? We even conceived of, hey, what if we agree on a portion of the bridge with Kiewitt and we have to go another route because we could agree with pricing on some of it but not all of it. So we even had that kind of contingency.
Kind of half of what you wound up doing, right?
Yeah. So we just worked.
Wow, that's interesting.
A whole bunch of different contingencies. So, I mean, we certainly didn't want it to happen. I think I'll reemphasize that.
Sure.
But when it did happen, we were somewhat prepared with that, plan. And then so it was really just starting to work through some of the details and getting those details ironed out so that we could go to industry as quickly as possible. And the team, the MDTA team, the GEC team, Federal Highway, did a great job, advancing those plans really quickly, and being able to get us to the point where we could have that industry forum and make those announcements, because we wanted to get that information out. We didn't want teams to sort of be forming in a vacuum of information where they're just guessing at what we wanted to do. We certainly didn't want that to linger, so we wanted to get information out about our approach as quickly as we could. And I think the event went really well this week. So I was really pleased with how that went.
And then here you are. So it's great that it worked out this way. From somebody who's not into contracting and for the lay people, can you try to quickly and simply explain the difference between how the different contracts are done? You've got competitive sealed bidding,
Yep.
and then two-step competitive sealed proposal.
Yeah, so
What-
I can.
Jim, what the heck does that mean?
That was our procurement professionals that put those in there. That's the language out of Comar, so that's out of our regulations. So essentially breaking that down, the competitive sealed bid is sort of our normal process, our low bid process, where it's we're going to have 100% design, so there's no questions there, and this is how we deliver 5% of MDTA's projects are delivered with this competitive sealed bidding. The competitive sealed bidding, just we're gonna have qualifications in there so that we can get the quality contractors that we want, people with experience on building bridges or demoing in marine based demolition, subaqueous blasting, the things that we need. So we're gonna look and ask for qualifications so that that we have a focused group of people that can bid on it. And then so that gets evaluated when you submit your bid. Make sure you meet those qualifications. But essentially, this is like any other run-of-the-mill procurement that we'll do for MDTA transportation projects. Now, that competitive two-step competitive sealed proposal is just another way of saying it's a design build. And so on the design build, what we're going to do, because it's the complex bridge work, the cable stayed bridge, we're going to have a request for qualifications first. So that's the first step. The first step, this summer will be a request for qualifications. And so we're going to get the firms that are going to submit, again, sort of their team, their past experience, showing us that they have the ability, they've done this before successfully, and provide us with those examples and the folks that are on their team of how they would deliver this. There is a little bit of a design aspect to it, so they will have a design team as well that they have to put together, not just construction. And then after the qualifications come in, we'll produce what we call a reduced candidates list. And that reduced candidates list essentially gets us to a manageable number of teams that will be then submitting after we put out a request for proposal. So that's the second step. The second step is now the proposal, and that's where they're going to put together the fixed price. So they're going to give us a price that it takes to build the cable stayed bridge and the marine approaches, as well as the vessel protection. And that's going to be a fixed price that we are going to have the schedule at that point and the pricing, and we'll be able to evaluate those proposals and make a recommendation to our board for approval based on the best value to the state. So that's a consideration of pricing and technical. So we're going to rank them technically and rank them based on their pricing, and then combine those for a best value award, and that's something our board would approve.
I have a follow-up question related to the way that the project is now being organized, and you're putting out a request for bid for 4 separate projects then as part of the overall build.
Yes.
And one of the questions that came up in the office this week was, or maybe the concept was, okay, it's quite possible that we could have 4 individual firms working on the 4 individual parts, or we could have one firm that could be doing all 4.
Yeah.
Does that mean that there has to be management and collaboration between all of those firms to make sure that everything connects all together all at once? And some of the conversations was, well, how do they make it match together in the end? And I go, well, I'm sure there is equipment and scientific processes that allow for that. But can you talk just a little bit about that, the four project model now?
Yeah, that's great.
And can Kiewitt bid on any one of these four?
So I'll start there.
Okay.
As part of their contract for the progressive design build, we put in there a restriction that the successful proposer would, in the event of an off ramp on all or any part of the project, would not be able to bid and participate on that. And
Very interesting.
So Kiewitt and there's subsidiaries would not be able to participate in the proposal phase of it. So they wouldn't be able to win the work, essentially.
So can I just do what I think is a hypothetical, theoretical? So
Yeah.
Kiewitt owns Weeks Marine, right?
Yes.
Weeks Marine is the cranes that are all out there right now, pretty much.
Yes.
Can Weeks partner with somebody else, or is Weeks eliminated from participating completely?
Weeks is eliminated or precluded, we say, from participating in, the bidding for, proposing for any of the four contracts.
Wow. That's because they have a lot of equipment. I'm sure they're not the only one. And so this, can I jump in here, Kipp?
Yeah.
And so this leads me right down to, you led me right down this line here. Like, one of the questions, obviously, with this off-ramping, the state, MDTA, whoever made the decision, feels that there's not enough risk in rebidding this, that you're worried about not having enough people or not having enough equipment or not getting the equipment here soon enough, or the equipment would be too expensive, and thereby you wind up right back within whatever, $1 billion of the number that you just went through trying to avoid. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we were approaching this by the idea that we wanted to get that best cost and best schedule possible while still meeting all the safety standards. And so not compromising on safety, we want to get those other two items. And we feel like the best way to do that was to maximize competition. And we believe that the four contract approach, as opposed to like one large contract doing it again, gave us that ability to maximize that approach. We can, these contractors will be able to focus where their strength is. And so, and I'm trying to work in Kipp's question too. So,
Sorry.
One contractor in theory could win all four if they were so inclined to be able to, price the contracts and propose on them to where they could be that competitive. It's possible. It's not ruled out. It's not precluded that one guy can't win them all. If they're the low bid on the three, and then they're the best value to the state on the fourth, then we have one contractor we're working with across four contracts, which would have been exactly kind of the same way we were managing the Kiewitt one. And so we know that there's the ability to do this demolition work by firms that aren't specialized in building cable stays, right? It's a different type of work. So there are.
I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express the last night, but that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm not in the construction industry at all, but
Yeah.
that makes sense to me.
And the same goes for those land approaches. So the north side approach, south side approach, they're tall, but they're not something that we don't have, highway contractors in the region that couldn't do them. And so we're really convinced that we're going to have a lot of competition, a lot of interest in this, and we feel like that's the best way to get the best cost, the best schedule out of this is by bringing that to market and being able to compete it amongst a number of different contractors and across a number of different contracts.
And it is interesting because, there's, talking heads, people out there on the radio, and so I'm just quoting them. This isn't Mike. How can the state, they can't manage one contractor. How could they possibly manage four? I know. It's just, but if you did it the same way, they'd probably say, well, geez, why would they do it the same way if it didn't work the first time? So no matter what you do, people are going to complain.
Yeah, and it's a consideration for us, and I've talked about it a little bit in some other things, but essentially, managing one humongous contract is sometimes more difficult for us than managing individuals because we're interfacing with just one group, but yet the same amount of work is occurring. It's just coming through one channel at one time, and so that becomes a challenge in itself a lot of times. And MDTA, we've done this across multiple different programs that we've had, and one good example, or kind of two good examples, the express toll lanes on I-95 north of the city. We had Section 100 opened, under construction back in the late 2000s, early 2010s. That was, multiple large contracts all working, within, a 6 mile stretch of each other, 7 mile stretch. Then we've done more recently the Northeast Extension. So over the past 6 years, we've worked 27 contracts over a stretch of 6 miles.
Wow.
At the same time, managing different contractors. Sometimes the same contractors, won multiple ones, but a lot of times we just had various ones, and they're all working on top of each other, trying to manage, changing traffic patterns and managing that traffic across each other. And, we opened that partially on schedule, and we're on schedule to open it fully next winter. So, MDTA is comfortable and has experience doing that. So that to us was not a daunting consideration when we were looking at this contracting approach. And sort of what Kipp mentioned about this interface, we call it, where one contract matches up with another. On this project, obviously it's all bridge almost essentially. And so, but among that, there are these bridge types, and they kind of correspond with the transition from land to marine. And so that was a natural interface point, a natural segment point. And so we have a lot of confidence, and especially the amount of time that the cable stayed and marine portion takes versus the land approaches. We're going to be able to get those land approaches out pretty quickly for bidding and get construction underway. And those will wrap up much sooner than the marine contractor would be necessarily ready for them. So it essentially will be just this pier and the rest of the bridge approaches that are just sitting there waiting for the guy, and he just has to match it up. And so in terms of interfaces, they can be really tricky. The structural part of that is not our biggest concern. It's kind of some of these issues, like we have a fire standpipe on the bridge. We've got communication lines and power lines, and so those things are a little bit more of a concern about that interface. Those become a little trickier than the structural actually. So.
Yeah, that was helpful for me to understand. Not only understanding that, hey, different projects actually are different construction entities. One piece is over complete water, and then another part of the project is totally different. And that you really could have different kinds of contractors to be able to do the same work. And then, so you might actually see some cost savings because of that, and not having a specialized person do something that other contractors can do.
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which might add to the cost if it's not something they're specialized in. They're going to hire us. They're going to sub out anyway. So
And
they're
then manage
whatever,
the sub, and then we're paying
10,
for
20%
the
or whatever the number is on top of that.
Yeah.
Whereas
And I think
we would be managing, so we're just taking that cost that we're putting out anyway to manage them all. So,
So
there is
yeah, so
potential savings
the
there.
state is the GC on this then.
That's, yeah. I mean, if you still look at it like that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you pretty much answered, but I was going to ask, why the staggered, why do the demo and then the land and then the, but I guess you mostly answered that. So what you pretty much just said, if I gathered it correctly, that the marine portion or the cable stay portion is a lot more involved, takes a lot more time to prepare for. Can you talk about why that is for folks who don't understand, like maybe this guy, like why can't they all be awarded at the same time? Would they get in the way of each other? What were some of the reasons that go into the staggeredness of it?
Right. So, a major factor in how fast we can get it out is just how involved it is, and that level of completeness in terms of design. So the demolition is the most straightforward part of the project scope. So
It requires no design whatsoever.
very little, right? And so
Right.
there's there's consideration for when you're doing some of the activities underwater, the subaqueous stuff. So we have a window that we want to hit this this coming fall winter. So we're really right. That's and the documents that needed for somebody to bid on it are not that complicated. So that's pretty straightforward. We're working on getting that out. You'll see something. There'll be something initially this summer with hopefully awarding in the fall. That contract would be able to just start right away, and then they're kind of going to be overlapping with Kiewitt, but they're not interfering. They're physically separated, those activities. So. So that's why we can get that one out first. Then the land approaches, they're 100% designed. We have that in hand. What we need to do is take the documents and the way that the contract documents were prepared for Kiewitt, and in kind of a design build model, we have to turn those into documents, specifications, contract documents that contractors can now bid on. And give us, itemized work that we're used to kind of breaking our projects into, so that contracts are used to seeing them. They understand the specifications with them, what the requirements are, and then they can bid that work. So we can do that relatively quickly as well. And we're targeting, this fall, winter to get those out on the street with the hope of getting the contractors under contract and underway next. Kind of early next year, next spring. So those contract documents aren't that difficult. We're basically giving you the 100%. We're saying, we just want you to build this. If you have some kind of great idea, we call that a value engineering change proposal. Yes, hit us with that. We'll consider it. But by and large, we want you to just give us the pricing, this fixed price on this, and we'll kind of have their schedule and try to hold them to that. So then it comes to the fourth one, the marine span's main span. That is going to be the way it was conceived now was for Kiewitt. Now these other groups all like to build things slightly differently. So we're going to allow for that because we believe that's how we get that best price. If we just tell them just build it like this, then you're going to get pricing that reflects, oh, I got to build it that way. I would have preferred this, but hey, they told me to build. No, we want you to tell us how you can build it. So we have to allow for that. At the same time, we're asking them, as I said, there's a designer component to it. they have to take on the responsibility of the design. So there's a piece there where they really need to dig in and understand how the design came together so that they can become responsible for it, right? They have to take that responsibility. They have to have engineers that are willing to seal the documents. For the other projects, we at MDTA and the GEC are going to be sealing the documents. We developed the project right along with Kiewitt, but for the main span, we want that, innovation. We want that, means and methods that's developed by the contractor. So that's why we have to go out, but that we have to allow time for that. And so that's where the component happens. If you don't allow time for it, you're going to see pricing that's reflective of that risk that we talked about. So we're trying to get some of that risk out of there by giving them time with the documents. They're going to have access to the major design firms, not Kiewitt, but the other people that were on Kiewitt's team. They're going to have access to them so they can ask them questions. They can really understand how the design team put all the documents together. They get their hands on the models. They get their hands on all our detailed reports. We ended up creating over 25,000 pages of reports for the project.
Wow.
So they're going to have all their hands on all that computer modeling, wind modeling, the scour analysis. They're going to have all that. But absorbing that and being willing to take responsibility for that, and at the same time estimating it and putting together ideas for changing it, innovation, that it takes a little bit of time, unfortunately. And so in order to get the best price and schedule, we need to allow for that to occur now. And so that's what kind of drives the schedule a little bit on that.
I really appreciate that because that was another question that I had here. And obviously this isn't synonymous really, but like my mom fell in love with this window. And she's got, a handyman guy who can do anything, right? He does really big stuff, but he does little stuff for mom. And so she's like, I want this window. He's like, I've never really put in that window. No, I want these windows. And guess what? When he was done with them, they didn't exactly work right. So that was going to be one of my questions, is it 100% designed? Can they make changes, or are you restricted? I want one of these, and it shall look just like this. But again, when we had our deck rebuilt, it was designed in a certain way. We wound up with a new subcontractor. He was like, I don't like the way this ties together up here. Can I do it a different way? So that's interesting. I'm learning a tremendous amount. Hopefully, people are going to be watching this, learning tremendous amounts.
Yeah. I think, that's the kind of the points you're making there is exactly why we're going that route. We're not going to be so open that all of a sudden it's not a cable stay bridge, right? It's not. That's not changing. That's not gonna happen. But
That makes sense.
How you form it up, how you build the foundations, exactly how you're doing the work as we build these pylons and the other piers. That's all information that they can come up with on their own, and base their pricing off of that, base their schedule off of that. And then the piece that still remains is the vessel protection. So that vessel protection won't be at 100%, and so they will really have a chance to do some innovation in terms of vessel protection. And so the vessel protection at the 24 and 25 that you kind of talked about earlier, that's going to be pretty much set. Maybe a little bit of means and methods of how they build the vessel protection stuff itself, but we're driving pile, right? We have we have 30 some pile already in vessel protection. So we're not gonna see a lot there, but there's still 4 other locations that they can innovate and give us good pricing on. So that's another opportunity for them where we're not being we're giving them performance specifications. We say we want certain performance out of whatever you propose, and then they meet that, they can propose different things. So we may see different approaches from different contractors based on how they like to build or what they think they can do the cheapest and quickest, while still
Very
meeting all the safety specifications. So we're not compromising
course.
safety. Just want to be clear about that. There still have to meet the safety is utmost, and then how you meet that is up to the contractor.
Right. So those giant piles that are 8 feet in diameter, 200 feet long, there's what prescribed to be 500 of them. Can those be changed? Are they all paid for? I know 100 or so are in the phase 1 and the rest are in phase 2. Slash, when you look at the 4 different contracts, how they're written, when they can be bid on, when the awards are done, and when they can be started, is that kind of linear and the same for all 4 of them, or like the marine portion is stretched out a lot longer than the other 3?
For items that aren't already under agreement with Kiewitt, they could change those. Just recognizing that we're going to be careful that it doesn't, negatively impact the schedule. So you're going to have to show us that you can make a significant change, like you're talking about with the foundation type. Mm-hmm. You're going to make that change, but it's going to be a benefit to the project under your best value proposal. So it's going to have to reflect, the schedule and cost is going to have to be reflective of that change, and so then we could consider it, and it would work well for proposers. That phase 1 work that's with Kiewitt is for all of the 8-foot pile that is at the 24 and 25. So it does not address 22 and 23. It does not address 26 and 27. So there are areas that these teams could look at. So Kiewitt does have, the agreement to work on the 238 piles that are at 24 and 25.
Very interesting.
The other part, the second question was
just kind of the timing of how the contract is spaced out from the time you write it up or you accept bids and then they're awarded and then start, like those 4 different things. Like, are they all kind of spaced out? Like,
yes. So the demolition, again, it's the most straightforward. It's also the least schedule on that one. So that one's going to go out first. It's going to conclude first. The Southland approach would go next because there's a little bit more bridge there than on the north. So that we want to stagger those so that contractors don't have to look at 2 bid documents at the same time. So they'll be able to look at that Southland approach. The idea is that takes a little bit longer in construction anyway. So if we can get that underway first, both the Southland and Northland approaches would end up kind of completing around the same time. So that would be the idea, is even though they're a staggered start, they'd be approximately wrapping up and delivering around the same time. And then the marine span cable stay, that's the longest duration. Everything runs through that, through the main pylons in terms of schedule for the overall project. So those are going to be the longest ones. So again, the idea would be that the land contractors deliver, they're done. It's there and waiting for the marine span contractor when he's, completely up to height on his piers, and then when he's ready to place those girders, he would already have the piers in place, the first transition piers. So that's kind of how that would work.
Very cool. Well, really appreciate you joining us, Jim. I need another half hour. You always leave us wanting more, so please come back again.
Yeah, I might be the fourth time guest, right? So
yeah, right.
Yeah,
we'll keep going.
Keep
No,
going
I
for the
think-
record.
That's right.
Yeah.
Really do appreciate
thank-
it. I mean, it's a great opportunity to talk to you guys. You guys ask, great questions. I know you see a lot of the sort of questions that people are posing and kind of discussing, and so it's a great opportunity to be able to talk to those and to you guys and explain some of that stuff in this setting. So we really are appreciative of that. Thank you.
Yeah, we thank you for your time and the transparency still that answering those questions and getting the information out to the general public so that they can be informed also. So we thank you for that and thank you for your time today on that. So
Yeah, thanks so much
All
for
right.
joining us.
yes, absolutely. All right, Jim Harkness on the Two Guys Talking Ship podcast.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you, guys.
That was impressive.
Right? Mike
I-
needs to learn to keep his head still in the camera space, but wow, man, I
Yeah.
learned so much from that. I probably say that every time we have Jim on, which is
maybe.
probably why we have Jim on, because if I'm learning stuff,
Right.
if I'm learning things and details and processes and what goes into cost and estimating and contracting, then there's probably a whole lot of other folks that are listening
Yeah.
who are learning alongside it.
I appreciate him spending the time explaining why the project was broken up into four and how that can really align with the end result. I also I felt, not that I felt bad about it, but I felt better about this whole rebidding. The off ramping and now the rebidding, and the way that he designed like the different part, how the different projects or why they were broken apart, and there are
Right.
actually different, almost four separate projects put together.
Right. And three separate specialties, right?
Right.
Roadways, marine
Yep.
demo, and then marine bridge building, if you will, if you want to call it those.
But what he-
and why they were broken up and why they were timed the way they were timed. And I probably skipped 3 or 4. I had 9 questions listed,
Yeah.
and he pretty much skipped over 3 of them and just kind of answered them for me with me and not having to ask, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, but that also for me tells me that he is aware of what the problems are. We've tried to sit here and go, okay, well, what's going on here? What are some questions that we can ask? Or hey, let's we're hearing all the static from the general public. Let's formalize the formal questions. But he was kind of answering them, before we could go and ask them. So
Right.
to me, that sounds like that they really are aligned with the situation. They understand, and it's, while the news to the general public is not what everybody wanted, they are still aggressively going after this thing and getting this thing done.
Yeah, again, like I said to Jim, it seemed like it was only a couple of weeks. I mean, I wanted to have this in my head so I could say it. I wanted to have time to look up the dates. How long was it when they announced the off-ramping till the time they announced that they were going to do that information session, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, it was like days or just a couple of weeks. It was a very short process.
Right. So, I mean, it seems like, they had all this lined up, ready to go, in these inboxes, old school, if you will, in a folder on your computer. All right,
Yeah.
we've got here's, right? And he said, we had to anticipate this. It was an option. It was something that could happen. So we wanted to be ready so that when it did happen, we're not trying to figure out what's the next step.
What do I have to go do next? Right.
Because you already have a plan. It's already set up. Not that should be newsworthy, but
right.
I'm fascinated by how things work. So to hear that they had thought all this through behind the scenes, and how fast, because when they did the information session, I had no idea that we were going to hear about the contracts, how they were written, how they were timed, how they were split up. I had no idea that that was going to come out of that session. Now, I think some of our engineering friends probably knew that or probably surmised that or could have told us that, hey, here's the kind of data that's going to come out of this
Sure.
in two days from now. You're going to get all this information. Just fascinating to learn all this stuff. And how, without me having to ask, he went into, okay, in some parts, contractors are allowed to make changes if they show it, what was the term? A value added process. In other words, if it's going to cost us more money or delay, if there's a way you want to do this, maybe a process, maybe how you build X. It still looks the same, but how you want to build it is different. If you can show that you can do it faster or cheaper, and it's the way that you like, then okay, we'll consider that.
Right.
So I really had no idea that that's. Did you know that?
I didn't understand
kind of
it.
a typical thing. Did you?
No, in contractual agreements or the RFP, RFQ process, yes, I am familiar with that part of it. So as he was describing it, I was like, okay, that's how they're going to. I've
heard of this before. This is fairly normal.
This makes sense to me. I just didn't know that that's what that was going into that particular conversation.
Right. Yeah. Man,
So-
and like I said to Jim, we could have kept going for probably another 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
I would have just kept drilling.
Yep. But I do appreciate the time that he spent and answered all the questions, and he's got a bridge to build. So
How about that?
I appreciate him spending
Instead of coming
hours.
on with these yahoos.
Right, exactly.
Right. And then, let's talk about what else is going on here. The elephant in the room. I have a job. You have a job. I have a wife and a family. You have a wife and a family. There's Jim. There's a guy that he works with who's also involved in the decision process. So we're talking about, I don't know, 8 or 10 different schedules that have to come together just so, you can see these two or three heads in the box. And,
That is very correct. Yes.
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So it's really cool that the timing of it, they just had this session and then Jim's here. That's pretty cool.
That is really cool.
That's some great turnaround. So would be interesting to see. We'll have to look at like the award process on the different contracts, and so in another 3 to 4, 6 months, hey, here's another good time to have Jim on to talk about after this just got awarded or after the Marine demo is done or let me see, Marine demo awarded this summer starting in the fall, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And then approaches awarding in the fall starting in spring of 27. So very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff.
All right, everybody. So that was I know that was just an episode that just focuses on current status of the bridge, but with everything that's happened in the past couple of weeks, we felt like it was important. We got a couple of other guests coming up that we've already are lining up
in
our next episodes, and we still haven't gotten a full update on state of the port and what's happening. So we have a lot of information still coming, so stay tuned.
Hey, so as we get to the end here, just a reminder, Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay Shipwatchers, we've got a website full of information. We've got the live cameras that you can watch them work on the bridge. Not just ships coming by, but you can watch them do this work. Links to the podcast, a lot of information on the website. We're all over socials, Instagram, Twix, Twitter, X, shout out Amy Lawrence, all over the place. So check us out and subscribe to all those different channels for all different kinds of information.
Absolutely. And if you want the audio version of this, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And as we get things going, we'll continue to populate our website at www.twoguystalkingship.com. Be careful how you spell that out, please.
Be more careful how you say it.
That's right. All right. All right, let's go ahead and count this one off. 3,
Let's do it.
2, 1.
Happy ship watching. Wow, we nailed that one. I don't know how that happened.
I don't know either. Okay.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this episode interview with Jim, and we'll see you on the next one.